Hello, everyone. Welcome to week 2, creative writing. I'm just going to go over real quickly what you're working on so that hopefully it answers any questions you have before you get started. If you find you still have questions, just shoot me an email, gwen.hart@msun.edu. Happy to hear from you. So we're in week 2 poetry and the one sentence poem discussion. I showed you this in the week 1 video. I'm just going to show you really quickly again. So you're going to go to this one sentence poem archive. This is an online literary journal that publishes one sentence poems. And you're going to use the search tool to look up the words that I've given you next to your name. And I just gave everyone different words so that we get different poems. We get a variety of poems to look at. You're going to choose 3 poems that you admire. So just read through as many as you need to get to 3 that you like. And then start a new thread in the discussion board. Start a new thread right down here by hitting reply. Title the discussion post with your name, and then copy and paste all 3 poems in there beneath each poem so it's clear which poem it goes to. Say at least one sentence about what you think is cool about this poem. That's really what I want to know. And I'm going to click this real quick just to show you what I'm talking about. One sentence poem archive. We're going to go to this magnifying glass up here. And if my word was, actually, I'll do a word that, I don't know if this was on here. We're going to do warm. And I'm going to click it to open up the poem. So the title of this poem is Standing in the Lukewarm TV Static Salt Bath of the Target Baking Aisle. Whoa, that is one major title. So one thing I might like about it already is that it's a one sentence poem with a really long title. How interesting. Maybe I didn't expect that a one sentence poem could have a really long title. Notice also that this title goes right into it's also the first line of the poem. You can tell because it has a comma and it's reads right into it. So it's both the title and the first line. So your poem, when you write a poem, the next step needs to have a title. It can be a standalone title that sets up the poem, or it can be like this, where it moves right into it. So standing in the lukewarm TV static salt bath of the Target baking aisle, I stare at the colored mini marshmallows and think about my sister, who sometimes melted the pastel pink, orange, and yellows on top of her hot cocoa like a dollhouse sunset, but more often ate them straight from the bag, all alone in her purple room that smelled so badly of medicine, like curdled milk on her breath. But at least her room wasn't bleached clean, like this fluorescent emptiness, with people beeping all around me, and announcements in calm women's voices, breaking the all-consuming, sterile light. And if I closed my eyes, I wouldn't see the marshmallows anymore, but the marshmallows are the only thing that don't feel like the ICU, and there is buzzing behind my eyes, which are dry, because I haven't blinked since I saw the mini marshmallows tucked away in their plastic home, screaming about what they aren't. And my roommate asks if I'm okay, so I stumble on, and outside, the intravenous sunset drips on the pavement. Cool. So if I were writing about this poem, I could come up with a title. I might also comment that this uh, description of the melted marshmallows on top of the hot cocoa, like a dollhouse sunset, is a really cool image. It's a really cool way of describing that. So that might be my comment. I would also notice that this poem has a big turn in it. Everything's kind of funny and happy, right? Until line 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, where the room smelled so badly of medicine. Then we find out the sister was ill, right? And that takes us into a whole different place, right? And we find out the rest of the poem, the person is actually in the hospital and trying to mentally, right, go somewhere else in their mind, going back to a happy memory. So there's a lot going on in this poem, right? I could say much more than one sentence about it, but I want you to pick out one thing. I also want to point out in this poem, as in all the poems that you're going to look at, they're divided into lines. So even though this is all one grammatical sentence, it's a really long grammatical sentence. Not all the poems you're going to look at this week are going to be this long by any stretch. But it also is divided into lines. So it's intentionally divided so that it breaks up the sentence and we get one piece at a time. And that's what allows this to be more of a surprise because we don't get it until that new line. It's not one long stretched out sentence. Notice also that the first and last words, of lines get more emphasis. So marshmallow, sometimes, yellows, sunset, bag, room, medicine, breath, clean. These are all kind of words that hit hard in this poem because of where they placed. This poem also has 2 stanzas. And I notice in the second stanza, we're making a leap in time to like this fluorescent emptiness. This is a new hospital setting, right, that he's in. And so the poem has both a sentence as a unit, a stanza, which is kind of like a paragraph in prose, not exactly, but it's functioning somewhat similarly, and then also the line. So the line is a unit of meaning. I stare at the colored mini marshmallows is one unit of meaning in the poem. So I just want you to notice that, and you're also going to use that technique of breaking a sentence into lines when you write your own poem. So the first step is finding 3 poems that are of interest to you, writing one sentence about what you find interesting about them, and then that's for Tuesday. So by 2 p.m. on Tuesday, so we can all discuss them in class, but also you'll be able to see other people's. Right after that, you'll be able to see the in-class people's. So obviously, if you're working during the day on Tuesday, turn it in Monday night. I'm not saying you have to turn it in at 1:59 on Tuesday. That's just when we're going to talk about them in class for the face-to-face people. And then the second thing you're doing for Thursday is I will post a list of ideas for one sentence poems based on what the face-to-face people and I talk about in class about poems they liked, poems you liked. And so you'll have a whole list of ideas, but probably your imagination will be pretty well sparked by reading these yourself. And you're going to write your own one sentence poem. I suggest trying a few and then post what you think is your best experiment so far. We're experimenting, we're testing this out. These are some things that your poem has to contain. So this is crucial that you follow these guidelines. And I adapted these from the guidelines for that journal, one sentence poem. Like to have your poem published there has to follow these guidelines. So I adapted them a little bit for our purposes, but this is with their starting point. So give your poem a title. Sometimes it's easier to come up with a title after you write the poem. That's fine. Notice that your title can be standalone. Like that poem of that title of that poem could have been Thinking About My Sister in the ICU, right? But he had a different title. So it could be that title that sets it up. It could be also the first line of the poem. The poem has to be a grammatical sentence. That means it could be simple, compound, complex, or compound complex. I put a little link in here to remind you what that means. Obviously, one sentence can be long and still be grammatical. It can be short and be grammatical. It's not about the length. It's about the how it's structured. You're going to start the poem with a capital letter. Just going back to this poem, notice that the title uses title capitalization. So all of the words except a and the and prepositions, so in and of in this case, are capitalized. Then the rest of the poem is capitalized just like we would capitalize a sentence. It starts with a capital letter, but all the lines are not capitalized. That's typical in contemporary poetry. So you want to follow that. You're going to end with a terminal punctuation mark because it's a sentence. So we end here with a period, but it could be a question mark. It could be an exclamation point, depending on your poem. Semicolons, we're going to avoid because their main function is to connect multiple complete sentences. And we really want to aim for one tight, one sentence poem. Notice that the poems you're going to be reading probably don't rhyme. And we're not going to rhyme this week. We're going to focus on making one sentence that can read like a poem. And we will talk about sound and sound effects in future week. There has to be at least one line break in your poem. So that means, like I said, you're going to take your sentence and experiment with different places you can break it. What looks or sounds cool to you, right? We're kind of experimenting at this point. When you break it into lines, it helps to give you that sense of surprise, like we got in the poem that I just picked out, where we suddenly find out the sister was ill. It helps you control the pace, so it makes people read slower the more line breaks that you have. And it can even highlight certain sounds in the poem if they appear at that beginning of the line, end of the line. So it's really the line breaks that is some of the art in the poem. And then finally, your poem's going to be single spaced and left justified. So left justified just means you see how all of these lines start at, this would be the left margin. Okay, it's not centered. Typically, poems are not centered unless you have a good reason to do it. That's an unusual thing to do. So you want to do that only when it's serving a purpose for the poem. And I'm giving you an example here of this is actually one of my poems that was published in One Sentence Poems, and it has an unusual organization for a reason. So this poem is Snow Geese Migration. The notes of the parting song rearrange themselves again and again across the sky. So I intentionally arranged it to look like a V of geese flying away, and you're hearing them. That's the parting song as they're leaving, right? But the only reason I did that intentionally is because it adds to the meaning of the poem. You know, most of my poems do not look like this. They're left-centered. That's the typical standard way of doing a poem. I just want to give you a heads up that Word can be super annoying, and it has some settings in it that are not conducive to poetry. And so one keeps it from being truly single spaced, and one keeps putting a capital letter at the beginning of the line when you don't want it. I can show you I'll show you in a second really quickly what it looks like on my screen. It might look somewhat different on yours if you have a different version of Word or a PC. I'm on a Mac, but I'll give you a chance to see what it looks like on mine. So what you're going to do by the end of the day on Friday, sorry, I think I said Thursday, by the end of the day on Friday, post your 1-sentence poem draft for workshop. And then by the end of the day on Sunday, you're going to comment on at least 2 other people's posts. You'll get to see online students, face-to-face students. Everybody's turning it in same time. I want you to comment the following things: the title, the images or phrases. So images in poems can be anything that's visual, but also any of the senses. So sound, touch, smell, taste, things you can hear, that beeping in the ICU, all those things. And then line breaks, where were the line breaks particularly effective? And again, we're learning to look at line breaks, so this is what you're finding out. And this feedback is just your readerly feedback. You can all do this because you can all read the poems, and your feedback is valid. So don't feel self-conscious about doing this. This is what we're starting to practice, right, and learn. So everyone's going to appreciate getting the feedback from you, and you're going to get some feedback from them. And I will comment as well, so you get the feedback. Okay, so I'm just going to share real quick. Let me pull up a Microsoft Word real quick, and I will share this with you. Okay, so I'm just going to start typing my poem. Pretend that this is my poem. Oops. This is what it would look like. Okay, so this is not single space, clearly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going up here, which is where you usually choose 1.0 is single space, 2.0 is double spaced. Even if you pick 1.0, it's still not truly single spaced. You want to click this remove space after paragraph, and voila, you've got this. Now mine did not start capital letters, but yours probably will, because I've already turned off. And let's see, I'm not sure you can even see this. Can't see this on my screen, but in the word menu at the top of the page, I'm picking preferences. And under preferences, I'm going to autocorrect. And then you just turn off autocorrect, uncheck it. And that's how I got it to stop doing that. So mine is just like that permanently. Okay, so again, if you have any questions, let me know, but I look forward to seeing what you come up with this week and reading your 1-sentence poems. And I hope you enjoy experimenting with 1-sentence poem this week. Thank everybody. Bye.